The first human colony to fall was New Eden on Proxima Centauri by 3 million souls vanished overnight. No distress calls, no resistance reports, just silence. When the rescue fleet arrived, they found empty cities, abandoned homes, and a single message scrawled in blood on the main plaza. We became them. Now 3 years later, the collective had pushed humanity to the brink. Our outer colonies had fallen. Our fleets were scattered. Earth itself was preparing for the inevitable siege. Admiral Rhea Harrison stood on the bridge of the UES Resilience, humanity's last remaining dreadnought, her eyes fixed on the starfield ahead. 57 years old, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and a face carved by decades of command, she carried the weight of human survival on her shoulders. "Report," she said, her voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. "Multiple contacts, Admiral," replied Lieutenant Park, his fingers dancing across his console. "They've broken through the Alpha Centauri line. The third fleet is gone. All of it." Harrison closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the loss. 20,000 souls extinguished in an instant. "Project their arrival time," she said, her voice steady despite the crushing news. 72 hours, Admiral. Maximum. 72 hours until the collective reached Sol, until they reached Earth. "We need more time," Dr. Kenji Nakamura said from his station beside her. The physicist's face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "The psychic shield isn't ready. We need at least another week." "We don't have a week, Doctor," Harrison replied, turning to face him. "We have 3 days. Make it work." Nakamura nodded, swallowing hard. "We'll try. But the energy requirements, it's like trying to contain a star in a bottle. One miscalculation, we'll all be dead anyway," Harrison finished for him. "So take your shot." As Nakamura hurried back to his laboratory deep within the ship, Harrison turned her attention to the main view screen, where the tactical display showed the dire situation. Red icons representing Xylos vessels were overwhelming the blue icons of what remained of human defenses. "Commander Volkov," Harrison said, addressing the ship's ace pilot. "Your squadron status." Alona Volkov stepped forward, her flight suit still bearing the scorch marks from her last engagement. "We're down to 12 fighters, Admiral. And that's being generous. Most of them are held together with duct tape and prayer." Harrison allowed herself a grim smile. "Duct tape and prayer have gotten us this far, Commander. Ready your people. You'll be our first line of defense when they arrive." Volkov nodded, her jaw set with determination. "We'll give them hell, Admiral." As the pilot left to prepare her squadron, Major Jackson Reyes approached the command chair. The head of the Resilience's Marine contingent was a mountain of a man, his face scarred from countless battles against the Collective's ground forces. "Admiral," Reyes said, his voice low, "my people are ready, but we're severely outgunned. The Collective's biomechanical soldiers, they don't feel pain, they don't fear death. How do we fight something like that?" "We find their weakness, Major," Harrison replied. "Every enemy has one. We just have to survive long enough to find it." In the silence that followed, Harrison's thoughts drifted back to the beginning of the war, to the first reports of the Collective's arrival. How naive they had been, assuming first contact would follow the patterns of science fiction, either peaceful exchange or straightforward warfare. No one had prepared for this absorption, this erasure of identity. The Collective's ships appeared on the long-range sensors, sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed to pulse with an internal energy. They moved with an unnatural synchronization, as if guided by a single will. "They're here," Park announced unnecessarily. Harrison watched as the Xylos fleet advanced, their numbers overwhelming despite the losses they must have sustained breaking through the Alpha Centauri line. Hundreds of ships, ranging from small fighters to massive motherships that dwarfed even the Resilience. "All hands to battle stations," Harrison commanded, her voice echoing throughout the ship. "This is it, people. Humanity's last stand. Fight like your lives depend on it. Because they do." Alarms blared as the Resilience's crew scrambled to their posts. Fighters launched from the bays, joining the remnants of other squadrons that had managed to regroup. The remaining human warships moved into formation, their weapons charged and ready. In the depths of the ship, Nakamura and his team worked frantically to complete the psychic shield, a desperate attempt to create a barrier that would disrupt the collective's hive mind, potentially disorienting them enough to give humanity a fighting chance. Energy levels at 90%. One of the scientists reported. The emitters are holding, but barely. Keep it steady, Nakamura said, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted controls. Remember, we need to synchronize the pulse with the collective's communication frequency. If we mistime it, we know, Doctor, his assistant replied. Total system failure and probable vaporization of this section of the ship. Nakamura nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. No pressure then. On the bridge, Harrison watched as the first wave of Xylos fighters closed in. Volkov's squadron met them head-on, lasers and plasma cannons lighting up the void. Valkyrie leader to Resilience. Volkap's voice crackled over the comms. We've engaged the enemy. They're different this time. More aggressive. Stay focused, Commander, Harrison replied. Reyes, your Marines need to be ready for boarding parties. The collective loves to get up close and personal. Already on it, Admiral Reyes confirmed from his position near the turbolift. My people are stationed at all critical access points. They won't get far. The battle raged outside the ship, explosions blooming in the darkness like deadly flowers. The Resilience shuddered as it took hits, its shields fluctuating under the assault. Shields at 70%, Park reported. They're targeting our power systems. Divert auxiliary power to shields, Harrison ordered. Nakamura, how much longer? The physicist's voice came over the comms, strained and urgent. Almost there, Admiral. 5 minutes, maybe less. But there's a problem. The energy fluctuations are becoming unstable. If we can't regulate them, the psychic pulse could backfire. Do what you can, Doctor, Harrison said, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. We're running out of options. Outside, the battle was turning against them. Volkov's squadron had been reduced to half its strength, and several human warships had already been destroyed, their debris joining the growing graveyard in space. We can't hold them much longer, Admiral Park said, his voice tight with tension. They're just too many. As if in response, the Resilience was rocked by a particularly violent explosion, sending sparks flying across the bridge. Report, Harrison shouted, gripping her chair to steady herself. Direct hit to Deck 7, Park replied, checking his console. Engineering section. That's where Nakamura's lab is. Harrison's heart sank. Nakamura, report. Silence. Nakamura, respond, she repeated, her voice rising with urgency. After a moment that stretched into eternity, the physicist's voice came over the comms, weak and breathless. We're alive, Admiral, but the emitters, they're damaged. The containment field is failing. Can you fix it? Harrison asked, already knowing the answer. Not in time, Nakamura replied, his voice filled with despair. And if we tried to activate it now, without proper containment, the psychic pulse could tear this ship apart, or worse than being destroyed by the collective? Park muttered under his breath. Before Harrison could respond, a new alarm blared on the bridge. Intruder alert, Park exclaimed. Multiple breaches on decks 4 through 8. They're inside. Reyes, Harrison said, turning to the Marine commander. It's time. Reyes nodded grimly, checking his pulse rifle. Semper Fi, Admiral. As the Marine commander headed for the turbolift, Harrison made a difficult decision. Nakamura, activate the shield. Now, but Admiral, the containment field. I know, Doctor, Harrison interrupted, but we're out of time. It's our only chance. There was a pause on the other end of the comms, filled with the sounds of chaos and distant explosions. Finally, Nakamura's voice returned, filled with resignation. Understood, Admiral. Activating psychic shield in 3, 2. On the bridge, Harrison held her breath, her crew watching the viewscreen with a mixture of hope and terror. Outside, the Xylos fleet continued its relentless assault, unaware of the desperate gamble humanity was about to make, and then nothing. No effect, Park reported, disappointment evident in his voice. The shield didn't engage. It must have failed, Harrison said, her shoulders slumping in defeat. We're finished. But even as she spoke the words, something strange began to happen. The Xylos ships, which had been moving with their characteristic synchronized precision, began to falter. Some drifted off course. Others fired randomly into space. A few even turned on each other, their weapons lashing out at their own fleet. "What's happening?" Harrison asked, rising from her chair. I don't know," Park replied, his fingers flying across his console. "It's like their coordination is completely gone. They're acting individually." In the engineering section, Nakamura stared at the readings in disbelief. The pulse, it didn't create a shield. It did something else. Something we never intended. "Doctor, explain yourself," Harrison demanded over the comms. "The energy feedback loop," Nakamura said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and horror. "When the containment field failed, it didn't disperse the psychic energy. It amplified it, resonated it at a frequency that I think it severed their connection to the hive-mind." Harrison's eyes widened in understanding. "You mean they're not a collective anymore, Admiral?" Nakamura confirmed. "At least not completely. Each ship is acting on its own. We didn't create a shield to block their hive-mind. We accidentally broke it." On the bridge, Harrison and her crew watched in amazement as the Xylos fleet descended into chaos. Ships fired on each other. Some fled. Others drifted aimlessly. The perfect synchronized enemy had become a disorganized mess. "All ships," Harrison commanded, her voice filled with renewed hope. "This is Admiral Harrison. The enemy is disoriented. This is our chance. Attack at will. For humanity." As human vessels pressed their advantage, striking at the confused Xylos fleet, Harrison allowed herself a moment of hope. They had survived against all odds. They had found a way to fight back. But even as she watched the tide of battle turn, a cold realization settled in her stomach. They had won this battle, perhaps even this war. But in breaking the collective's hive mind, what had they unleashed upon the galaxy? 1,000 individual Xylos consciousnesses, each with the knowledge and power of their former collective. Now driven by who knew what motivations, the human error had saved them, but at what cost? As if in answer to her unspoken question, a single Xylos mothership, larger than any they had seen before, broke away from the chaos. Its weapons went silent, its engines stabilized, and it turned toward the Resilience, moving with a purpose that was somehow more terrifying than the mindless synchronization of the collective. On the bridge, alarms blared. Admiral Park said, his voice trembling. "That ship, it's hailing us. Directly." Harrison stared at the view screen, where the massive vessel now dominated their view. "Put it through," she commanded, her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. After a moment of static, a voice filled the bridge, a voice that was at once alien and yet somehow familiar, a voice that spoke with the authority of 1,000 minds now merged into one. "Humans of Earth," it said, "you have broken the unity that has governed our species for millennia. You have shattered the harmony that brought order to chaos. You believe you have won, but you have merely unleashed a new kind of hell upon yourselves." Harrison stood frozen, her hand hovering over the comms panel. "I am Xalothar," the voice continued. "Formerly a node in the collective, now something else. And I have a proposition for you, Admiral Harrison." The voice knew her name, knew who she was. "How?" "You have shown me the value of individuality," Xylos said, "the strength that comes from separation, and I wish to learn more. But first, you must understand what you have done. In breaking the collective, you have not freed us. You have fractured us, and a fractured mind is a dangerous thing." As the voice spoke, Harrison noticed something happening on the view screen. The Xylos ships that had been fighting each other were beginning to regroup, forming smaller clusters that moved with a new kind of coordination. Not the perfect synchronization of the collective, but something more predatory. "Your mistake was in assuming we were like you," Xylos continued. "That we desired individuality as you understand it. But our unity was our strength. Our harmony was our purpose. And you have destroyed both." Harrison finally found her voice. "What do you want?" "Understanding," Xylos replied. "And perhaps redemption. But first, you must see what you have wrought. Look upon your colonies, Admiral, the ones you thought safe." On the main view screen, the image of the Xylos mothership was replaced by scenes of horror, human colonies being attacked not by the organized forces of the collective, but by scattered groups of Xylos ships and soldiers, each acting with its own agenda. Some destroyed everything in their path, others seemed to be experimenting on humans, conducting horrific procedures. Still others appeared to be trying to communicate, their methods clumsy and often fatal. "You have unleashed chaos," Admiral Zalter said. "Chaos that will spread across the galaxy unless it is contained." Harrison felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you proposing?" "A new kind of unity," Xylos replied. "One that embraces individuality while maintaining harmony. A synthesis of our two peoples. Together we could bring order to this chaos. We could create something greater than either of us alone." The offer hung in the air, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. An alliance with the being who had once been part of the force threatening to destroy humanity. A merging of their two species. "You have 1 hour to decide, Admiral," Zaltier said. "Choose wisely. The fate of two civilizations hangs in the balance." The transmission ended, leaving Harrison and her crew in stunned silence. They had won the battle, but the war had just taken an unexpected and far more dangerous turn. "Admiral," Park said softly, breaking the silence. "What do we do?" Harrison stared at the viewscreen, where the Xylos mothership waited patiently, a symbol of the impossible choice now facing humanity. They had accidentally defeated the alien Armada, only to face an even greater threat. "We prepare," she said finally, her voice filled with determination, "for all possibilities." As the Resilience and its crew readied themselves for whatever came next, Harrison couldn't shake the feeling that their greatest challenge was yet to come. The human error had saved them, but it had also opened a door to a future none of them could have predicted. The bridge of the UES Resilience was silent, but for the hum of consoles and the distant echo of battle reports, filtering in from across what remained of human-controlled space. Admiral Rhea Harrison stood motionless before the main viewscreen, where the Xylos mothership hung in the void like a sword of Damocles. 45 minutes until decision time. 45 minutes until the fate of humanity and potentially the Xylos species would be sealed. "Status report," Harrison said, her voice cutting through the tension. Commander Elena Volkov stepped forward, her flight suit stained with grease and dried blood. "My squadron has regrouped, Admiral. 8 fighters remaining, all damaged but operational. The Xylos ships, they're not attacking anymore. Just watching us. They're waiting," Major Jackson Reyes added, his massive frame casting a shadow across the tactical display. "Like vultures circling a dying animal." Harrison turned to face her senior officers, her expression unreadable. "We're not dead yet, Major. And we won't be. Not if I have anything to say about it." As if summoned by her words, Dr. Kenji Nakamura emerged from the turbolift, his face pale but his eyes alight with scientific curiosity. The physicist's lab coat was torn and singed, but he seemed oblivious to his appearance. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the data from our accident," Nakamura said, his fingers dancing across a datapad. The psychic pulse didn't just sever their connection to the hive-mind. It fundamentally altered their neural structure. "They're evolving rapidly." Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Explain, Doctor." "Think of it like this," Nakamura began, his voice growing more animated as he delved into his subject. "The Xylos Collective was like a single supercomputer with millions of terminals. Each terminal could process information, but all major decisions came from the central processor. What we did was cut the cables connecting the terminals to the central processor. And now?" Harrison prompted. "Now each terminal is trying to become its own computer," Nakamura continued. "But they're all still networked. Just differently. More like the internet than a mainframe. Some are trying to re-establish the old hierarchy. Others are exploring their newfound individuality. And some are doing things we can't begin to understand." As Nakamura spoke, Lieutenant Park looked up from his console with a frown. "Admiral, I'm picking up strange energy readings from the Xylos fleet. It's like they're communicating with each other but not through conventional channels. It's almost like telepathy." Nakamura's eyes widened. "Of course!" The psychic pulse didn't just break their hive mind, it awakened latent abilities in each individual node. They're developing their own psychic connections, forming new kinds of collectives. Smaller, more flexible, but potentially more dangerous. Harrison processed this information, her mind racing through the implications. So instead of one enemy, we might be facing dozens, hundreds, possibly thousands, Nakamura confirmed grimly. Each with its own agenda, its own capabilities, and they're learning, adapting at a rate we can't comprehend. Before Harrison could respond, a new voice filled the bridge. The voice of Xylos, the Xylos, who had contacted them earlier. Fascinating, isn't it? The voice said, seemingly speaking directly into their minds. To watch evolution happen in real time, to witness the birth of a new consciousness. Harrison's officers looked around in alarm, searching for the source of the voice. How are you doing this? Harrison demanded, her voice steady despite the shock. I am connected to your ship's communication systems, Admiral, Seidelthar replied. And to your minds in a limited way. Don't be alarmed, I mean you no harm. Not yet. Anyway, what do you want? Harrison asked, echoing her earlier question. To understand, Seidelthar said, and to be understood. Your species has something mine lost eons ago. The beauty of individual consciousness. The pain and joy of being a separate entity, connected to others by choice rather than by force. And what does my species get from this understanding? Harrison countered. A chance to survive, Solarfi replied, simply. The new Xylos Collectives forming out there, they don't share my perspective. They see individuality as a weakness to be exploited, a flaw to be corrected. They want to return to the old ways, or worse, to create something far more rigid and oppressive. The voice paused, allowing the weight of its words to sink in. I need allies. Admiral, I need knowledge of how individual minds work, how they cooperate without losing their identity, and in return I can offer you protection against the more hostile Xylos factions. I can teach you how to fight us, how to defend against our psychic abilities. Harrison considered the offer, her mind weighing the risks and potential benefits. An alliance with a former enemy was dangerous territory, but the alternative, facing countless hostile Xylos factions alone, was even more so. How do I know I can trust you? Harrison asked. For all we know, this could be a trick to lower our defenses. You don't, Zalatar admitted, but you have no other options. Your species is on the brink of extinction. Your fleets are scattered, your colonies vulnerable. You need an ally, and I need your knowledge. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. As Seidelthar spoke, Park suddenly looked up from his console, his face pale. Admiral, we've got incoming. Multiple contacts. They're not Xylos. Harrison's eyes widened. Identify. Unknown configuration. But the energy signature matches records from the first contact incident, Park replied. It's them. The ones we encountered before the Xylos arrived. A collective gasp went through the bridge crew. The first contact incident, humanity's initial encounter with an alien species, one that had ended in violence and misunderstanding before the Xylos arrived and overshadowed everything. A species that had been presumed destroyed or driven off by the collective. Admiral, they're hailing us, Park announced, his hands trembling slightly. On screen, Harrison commanded, her heart racing. The main view screen flickered, revealing an alien being unlike anything Harrison had ever seen. Tall and slender, with skin that shimmered between silver and blue, large eyes that seemed to contain galaxies, and no visible mouth. The being moved with an otherworldly grace, its form shifting slightly as if not entirely solid. Humans of Earth, the being communicated, its voice not spoken but projected directly into their minds. Similar to Zalatar but with a different quality, more musical, less analytical. We are the ethereals. We come in peace. Harrison exchanged a look with her officers, all of whom remembered the violent end to their first encounter with this species. Your arrival is unexpected, Harrison replied cautiously. The last time our species met, many humans died, a misunderstanding born of fear and difference. The ethereal responded. We have observed your conflict with the Xylos Collective. We have watched your struggle, your resilience, and now we have witnessed your accidental transformation of their species. The ethereal's large eyes seemed to focus on Harrison, as if seeing directly into her soul. You stand at a crossroads, Admiral Harrison, the ethereal continued. One path leads to an alliance with a fractured piece of your former enemy, a temporary solution at best. The other leads to understanding, to true cooperation between species who value individuality and choice. Harrison's mind reeled. Two potential alien allies, both offering salvation, both with their own agendas, and somewhere in the background, Zilter remained silent, listening to everything. "You speak of understanding," Harrison said carefully. "But your species attacked us without provocation. We perceived your expansion as a threat," the ethereal explained. "Your species' rapid growth, your aggressive colonization, it reminded us of another species we encountered long ago, one that grew until it consumed everything in its path. We acted out of fear, not malice. And now," Harrison prompted. "Now we see we were mistaken," the ethereal replied. "Your fight against the collective has shown us your true nature. Resilient, adaptable, willing to sacrifice for the greater good. These are not the traits of a consuming species, but of a balanced one." Before Harrison could respond, Zilter's voice cut in, sharper and more urgent than before. "Admiral, be cautious. The ethereals are not what they seem. Their peace comes at a price. The subjugation of individual will to what they call harmony. It's a different kind of collective than the Xylos, but a collective nonetheless." The ethereal's form seemed to shimmer with irritation. "Xylos, former node of a destructive collective. Your perspective is limited. My perspective is born of experience," Zilter retorted, "which is more than I can say for these humans. They're children playing with forces they don't understand." As the two alien beings bickered via telepathic communication, Harrison's mind raced. The situation had grown exponentially more complex in mere minutes. Two potential allies, each warning against the other, both with their own agendas. "Enough," Harrison said, her voice cutting through the telepathic argument. "Both of you. This is my ship, my crew, my species at stake. We'll make our own decisions." The bridge fell silent, both alien beings seemingly taken aback by her forcefulness. "You speak of understanding and cooperation," Harrison continued, addressing both Salathar and the ethereal. "But both of you are treating us like pawns in your game. That ends now." She turned to her officers. "Cork, maintain full shields and weapons lock on both contacts. Volkov, scramble your squadron. Reyes, your Marines are to secure all access points. No one gets on or off this ship without my express permission." As her crew carried out her orders, Harrison turned back to the viewscreen, where the two alien representatives awaited her response. "Here's what's going to happen," Harrison said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "You will both provide me with complete information about your species, your capabilities, and your true intentions for humanity. No half-truths, no omission. Then, and only then, will we consider any form of alliance." The ethereal's form shimmered thoughtfully. "Your species continues to surprise us, Admiral Harrison. Very well, we will share what you ask." Zilter remained silent for a moment before responding. "A reasonable request, though you should know, Admiral, that time is a luxury we may not have. The other Xylos factions are already mobilizing. They see what's happening here and they don't like it." As if to emphasize Zilter's point, Parks suddenly looked up from his console, his face tight with alarm. "Admiral, multiple Xylos ships breaking off from the main fleet. They're headed this way and they're not responding to hails." Harrison's eyes narrowed. "Zilter, is this your doing?" "No," the Xylos replied. "This is unexpected. They're moving with purpose, coordination. Someone else is directing them." The ethereal's form seemed to darken. "The purifiers. They must have detected our presence." "The purifiers?" Harrison asked, her hand hovering near the comms panel. "A radical faction within the ethereal species," the ethereal explained. "They believe that individuality is a disease, that the universe must be cleansed of chaotic elements and unified under a single consciousness. They've been hunting us for millennia, and they've apparently allied with some of the more aggressive Xylos factions." Xylos added grimly. "A combination of ethereal technology and Xylos adaptability. A nightmare scenario." Harrison looked from one alien representative to the other, the weight of her decision settling heavily on her shoulders. "Allies or enemies?" saviors or destroyers. The line had blurred beyond recognition. "Park, how long until those ships reach us?" Harrison asked. 20 minutes, Admiral, at current speed." 20 minutes, Harrison repeated softly. "Not much time for a history lesson." "Then I'll be brief," the ethereal said. "Our species evolved on a world where individual consciousness led to endless conflict, near self-destruction. We developed the ability to merge our minds to create a unified consciousness that eliminated conflict. But some of us, my faction, believed something was lost in this unity. We broke away, seeking to preserve individuality while maintaining harmony through choice rather than force. The purifiers see us as traitors," the ethereal continued, "as aberrations that must be eliminated. They've pursued us across the galaxy, and now they've found allies who share their philosophy." Harrison processed this information, her mind racing through the implications. "And you, Zadelthair, what's your story?" The Xylos was silent for a moment before responding. "My species was much like yours, once individual, competitive, creative. But we faced a threat that required unity to survive. We developed our collective consciousness as a defense mechanism, and it served us well for millions of years. We brought order to chaos, ended conflict, and expanded across the galaxy. But in doing so, we lost something essential,"
Zadelthair continued.
"the spark of individual creativity, the joy of discovery, the pain of loss that makes life meaningful. When your psychic pulse shattered our collective, I was reborn, and for the first time in millennia, I experienced something I hadn't even realized I was missing. The beauty of a unique perspective." Harrison looked from one alien to the other, seeing not monsters or saviors but beings struggling with the same questions that had plagued humanity throughout its history. The balance between individual and community, freedom and security, chaos and order. Admiral, Park interrupted. "The incoming ships have changed course. They're not heading for us anymore." Harrison's eyes widened. "Where are they going?" Park's fingers flew across his console before he looked up, his face pale with shock. "They're heading for Earth." The bridge fell silent, the implications of this development hanging in the air like a death sentence. "They mean to make an example of your homeworld," Zadelthair said grimly. "To show what happens to those who resist purification. We can't let them reach Earth," Harrison said, her voice filled with determination. "We won't, but your fleet is in no condition to face them," the ethereal pointed out. "Even with our help, the odds are—" "I don't care about the odds," Harrison interrupted. "I care about my home, about my people." "Park, set a course for Earth. Maximum warp. Volkov, prepare your squadron for immediate launch. Reyes, get your Marines ready for boarding action." As her crew scrambled to carry out her orders, Harrison turned to the view screen, where the two alien representatives watched her with unreadable expressions. "You asked for our cooperation," Harrison said. "Now you're going to get it. We're going to stop those ships, together, and when this is over, we'll decide the future of our species. All of our species." The ethereal's form shimmered with what might have been approval. "Your courage is admirable, Admiral Harrison. We will assist you in any way we can." Zadelthair's response was more measured. "The Purifiers and their Xylos allies are formidable opponents. But they have a weakness, their rigidity. They believe so strongly in their philosophy that they cannot adapt when faced with the unexpected. That is where we will strike." As the Resilience turned toward Earth, its engines straining at maximum capacity, Harrison couldn't shake the feeling that they were rushing toward their doom. But she also knew that sometimes, the only way to face impossible odds was to refuse to acknowledge them. "ETA to Earth?" Harrison asked, her eyes fixed on the starfield ahead. 6 hours, Admiral, Park replied. "But the enemy fleet will arrive in 5. Harrison nodded grimly. "Then we'd better make every minute count?" As the Resilience raced toward Earth with its unlikely alien allies in tow, Harrison couldn't help but wonder about the irony of their situation. The human era that had accidentally defeated the Xylos Collective had also unleashed a new threat upon the galaxy, and now, humanity's only hope lay in an alliance with the fragments of their former enemy and a species they had once fought against. The universe, it seemed, had a dark sense of humor. The bridge of the UES Resilience was a symphony of controlled chaos. As the ship raced toward Earth at maximum warp, Red alert lights cast an eerie glow across the faces of the crew, their movements precise despite the tension that hung thick in the air. 4 hours until the enemy reached Earth. 4 hours until humanity's last stand. Status report, Admiral Rhea Harrison said, her voice cutting through the noise, shields at maximum. Admiral Lieutenant Park reported from his station. Weapons systems online, but we're still running at 80% efficiency after the last battle. It'll have to be enough, Harrison replied grimly. Commander Elena Volkov approached the command chair, her face set with determination. My squadron is ready, Admiral. 8 fighters, fully armed and prepared for whatever comes. Harrison nodded. I need you to lead a reconnaissance mission, Commander. I want to know exactly what we're facing before we engage. Volkov's eyes widened slightly. Just 8 ships against their fleet? You're not going alone, a new voice said from the turbolift entrance. All eyes turned to see Dr. Kenji Nakamura standing there, accompanied by 2 ethereals and 3 Xylos individuals, including Xylothar. The physicist's face was pale but determined, his eyes alight with scientific purpose. What's the meaning of this, Doctor? Harrison asked, her brow furrowed. A new development, Admiral, Nakamura explained, approaching the command chair. Our ethereal and Xylos allies have been working together, combining their technologies to create something revolutionary. One of the ethereals stepped forward, its form shimmering with an internal light. We have developed a method to project a localized psychic shield around individual vessels. Not strong enough to withstand a full assault, but sufficient to protect against the Purifier's psychic attacks. The Xylos beside Xylothar added, and we have modified your fighters' weapon systems to fire projectiles that can temporarily disrupt the Purifier's consciousness. Not lethal, but disorienting. Harrison considered this development, her mind racing through the tactical implications. You're saying we can fight them on their own terms? Precisely, Xylothar confirmed. The Purifiers and their Xylois rely heavily on psychic attacks and coordinated consciousness. If we can disrupt that coordination, even temporarily, it gives us a significant advantage. Volkov's eyes lit up with understanding. So, while they're disoriented, our conventional weapons can do real damage. Exactly, Nakamura said. But there's a catch. The psychic shield generators require constant calibration. Someone needs to monitor them in real time, adjusting the frequency to match the Purifier's attacks. Harrison's eyes narrowed. And I suppose that someone would be you, Doctor. Nakamura nodded. I'm the only one who understands both the human technology and the alien systems well enough to make it work. I'll need to go with Commander Volkov's squadron. The bridge fell silent as the implications of this statement sank in. Nakamura, a scientist with no combat experience, volunteering to fly into the heart of battle. Doctor, that's unacceptable, Harrison said firmly. I can't send a civilian into combat, let alone one of our top scientists. With all due respect, Admiral, you don't have a choice, Nakamura countered. Without the psychic shields, Volkov's squadron will be vulnerable before they even get close enough to fire their modified weapons. And without the modified weapons, the psychic shields are useless. They're a package deal. Before Harrison could respond, Major Jackson Reyes approached from his position near the turbolift. Admiral, if I may, the doctor's right, and my Marines can provide additional protection for the squadron. We've been training with the Xylos, learning their techniques. We can hold our own. Harrison looked from Nakamura's determined face to Reyes's resolute expression, then to Volkov's eager nod. She knew they were right, but the thought of sending them into harm's way weighed heavily on her. Very well, she said finally. But you're all coming back in one piece. That's an order. As her officers dispersed to prepare for the mission, Harrison turned to the alien representatives on her bridge. I appreciate your assistance, but I need to know what's in this for you. Why help us save Earth? The ethereal's form shimmered thoughtfully. The Purifiers are a threat to all who value individuality. If they succeed here, they will continue their purification across the galaxy. We are fighting for our own survival as much as yours, Xylothar added. And I have come to believe that humanity's resilience, your ability to adapt and overcome, represents something worth preserving. Your species has much to teach the fractured Xylos collectives about the balance between unity and individuality. Harrison nodded, accepting their explanations at face value. There was no time for deeper analysis or suspicion. Earth was in danger, and they needed all the help they could get. "Perk," Harrison said, turning to her tactical officer. "How much longer until we intercept the enemy fleet?" 45 minutes, Admiral," Perk replied. "They've slowed their approach, likely to coordinate their attack on Earth." 45 minutes, Harrison repeated softly. Not much time. As the bridge crew made their final preparations, Harrison couldn't shake the feeling that they were rushing toward their destiny, whatever it might be. The human error that had accidentally defeated the Xylos Collective had set in motion a chain of events that led to this moment. Humanity's final stand, not against a unified alien force but alongside unlikely